Have you ever wondered why this message found you before November 7? Do you think it's a coincidence or a divine appointment? Because when God sends a word with a date, it's never random. He's preparing you for a turning point, a shift that will rewrite everything you thought was over. Before November 7, something in your life, your finances, your family, your health, your spirit will begin to move under His power. And God says, I am about to change everything, but I must first prepare your heart to receive it. You've cried, waited, and prayed, but now heaven is aligning in your favor. Listen carefully, because if this message reached you before that day, it means you're not late, you're right on divine schedule. 1. When God marks a date, it's never random. There are no coincidences in the kingdom of God, only confirmations. When heaven chooses a date, it is not a guess. It is a divine signature stamped on your timeline. God moves with precision, not accident. The same way He aligned the stars in their orbits, He aligns moments in your destiny. That's why this message found you before November 7, because something has already been written in heaven, waiting to unfold on earth. God marks moments, not merely to inform you, but to prepare you. He doesn't reveal dates so you can worry about what's coming. He reveals them so you can align your heart with what's already been decreed. There are shifts that require awareness, spiritual awakenings that happen when you realize you are standing on divine ground. Before God moves, He always whispers, get ready. When heaven marks a date, it means alignment has reached maturity. The prayers you prayed months or years ago have reached full term. What was once forming in the unseen is now ready to be birthed. The enemy might try to distract you before divine delivery, but he cannot cancel what God has scheduled. Heaven's calendar cannot be edited by human hands. You must understand God is not bound by time, but He uses time to teach trust. He sets divine appointments so your faith can meet His favor. Sometimes it looks like nothing is happening, but in the invisible realm, doors are being unlocked, names are being mentioned, and paths are being prepared. What looks delayed is simply divine timing in disguise. When God sets a date, it is often preceded by silence. Before miracles manifest, heaven goes quiet. It's not absence, it's anticipation. Just as a conductor pauses before a crescendo, God allows stillness before a surge. The quiet is a holy countdown. November 7 isn't just a number, it's a mark of movement that's already begun in your spirit. Throughout Scripture, God always attached meaning to moments. He told Noah when the rain would fall, Abraham when the promise would come, and the Israelites when the Passover would break their bondage. Every divine date carried transformation. So when heaven marks your life with a date, it's because change is not coming, it's already underway. You may not feel it yet, but the spiritual atmosphere around you is shifting. The winds of change don't always come with thunder. Sometimes they come as whispers. God often moves quietly, so only those attuned to His voice will recognize His work. That's why He brings this message now, to awaken your awareness before the wave arrives. God doesn't give dates for curiosity. He gives them for cultivation. He's calling you to posture yourself in faith, to prepare your heart for manifestation. There are blessings that require readiness, not because God is withholding them, but because He wants you to have the strength to sustain them once they come. November 7 is not about waiting, it's about readiness. When God marks a date, it is also a divine warning, not of danger, but of transition. He's saying, pay attention. I'm about to move. Heaven's schedule is precise, but your participation matters. Every act of obedience you make before that day is a seed for what will bloom after it. The timing is divine, but the response must be faithful. The presence of a date means that God has already concluded the outcome. He isn't planning your breakthrough, He's preparing you to witness it. What's written in heaven cannot be undone on earth. When God says a shift is coming before November 7, He's not predicting, He's revealing what's already decided in eternity. This is why you must not fear the future. When God marks a date, it's never for destruction, it's always for direction. He uses time as a tool to awaken your awareness. He doesn't want you to be surprised by the blessing. He wants you to recognize His fingerprints when it arrives. You are not waiting on time, time is waiting on you. Many dismiss divine timing because it doesn't align with their plans. But God's calendar runs on faith, not convenience. He often chooses dates that seem random to prove that His power is not confined to logic. When your breakthrough happens on an ordinary day, you'll know it was orchestrated, not coincidental. November 7 will not just be a date, it will be a testimony. When God marks a moment, He's also marking you. He's declaring ownership over your season. That's why battles intensify before breakthroughs. The enemy senses what's scheduled, but he cannot stop what's sealed. Your only task is to stand firm, stay faithful, and keep your spirit expectant. Heaven's countdown is still ticking. Some of the greatest moves of God begin in the most unsuspecting times. You might wake up that morning unaware of what's shifting, but heaven will already be in motion. By the time you notice it, the miracle will already have roots. Because when God marks a date, He doesn't just plan change, He performs it in layers, silently, steadily, surely. So remember this, you are not hearing this message by chance. God has aligned your timeline with His. Before November 7, He will not only change something around you, He will change something within you. This is not prediction, it's preparation. The date is not about pressure, it's about promise. And when that moment comes, you will understand why heaven marked it long before you ever knew its meaning. 2. The delay was a setup, not a denial. Delay is not God's rejection, it's His redirection. What you thought was a pause was actually a plan. Heaven never wastes time. It uses time as a tool to shape your destiny. When God holds something back, it's not because you're unworthy, it's because He's making it worthy of you. Every divine delay hides divine design. What you called waiting, heaven called preparation. God's silence in your season of delay was never absence, it was strategy. He was aligning people, places, and opportunities you couldn't see yet. If He gave it when you first asked, you wouldn't have been ready to hold it. God never delays to deprive, He delays to develop. And every moment of frustration was actually forming foundation beneath your feet. There are blessings that require maturity before manifestation. You prayed for increase, and God answered by building your endurance. You asked for breakthrough, and He taught you balance. That's why the delay felt long, because He was stretching your capacity to receive what's greater than you imagined. The wait was not wasted. It was weight training for your spirit. When heaven delays, hell panics. Because the enemy knows that what looks like stillness is actually strengthening. The devil can only attack your timeline when you mistake delay for denial. But once you understand that waiting is warfare in disguise, you stop worrying and start worshiping. The one who waits with faith cannot lose. God delays to protect what's divine. Some doors you begged to open would have led to destruction if He had said yes too soon. He saw what you couldn't, the motives, the traps, the immaturity that could have corrupted the blessing. His not yet was mercy wearing the mask of disappointment. If you only knew what He saved you from, you'd thank Him for every delay. Delay reveals what you truly believe. Anyone can have faith when things move fast, but true trust is proven in silence. When nothing changes, yet your heart still praises, that's when God says, now I can trust you. The delay purified your motives, stripped your pride, and made your obedience authentic. You became ready in the waiting. In divine timing, nothing is ever late. God is the master of synchronization. What looks behind schedule to you is right on time to Him. He knows when the soil of your life is ready to produce fruit. The delay was heaven waiting for your roots to deepen so your harvest wouldn't collapse under its own weight. The longer the delay, the greater the unveiling. God hides glory until it's mature enough to handle exposure. That's why your season of silence was sacred. Heaven was planting you where no one could see. Every tear you cried was watering the seed of your next breakthrough. And soon, what grew underground will bloom beyond expectation. You thought you were being punished, but you were being positioned. God wasn't holding you back, He was holding you in place until everything around you aligned. Sometimes the blessing is delayed not because of your failure, but because of someone else's timing. God was moving pieces behind the curtain so that when the curtain opened, your stage would be ready. The delay was heaven's way of training your discernment. In waiting, you learned what peace feels like and what pressure sounds like. You learned that not every open door is a God door. That wisdom will protect you in your next season of abundance. The delay taught you how to hear clearly when noise surrounds you. When God delays, it's because He desires perfection, not speed. He's crafting something eternal, not temporary. The slow process builds strong pillars. Quick success collapses easily, but divine success stands through storms. What God builds in delay cannot be destroyed by distraction. Every biblical promise had a waiting room. Joseph waited years for his dream to manifest. Abraham waited decades for Isaac. David waited in the fields before the throne. The delay was not a pause in the plan, it was part of the preparation. God never rushes what He intends to last forever. Delay also exposes dependency. When every door closes, you learn whether you trust the blessing or the blesser. God removed your options, so you'd realize He was your only source. That revelation is priceless because once you know He's enough, no delay can make you doubt again. What you thought was the end was actually the setup for a new beginning. God had to let certain things expire so that new ones could emerge. The delay made room for replacement for better doors, stronger relationships, and deeper faith. You were never being denied. You were being upgraded. So as November approaches, remember this. Every moment you thought was wasted was actually working for you. The waiting season was not empty. It was pregnant with promise. What God is about to release will make sense of every why. The delay was never denial, it was divine orchestration. And soon, you look back and say, now I see why He made me wait. 3. Heaven moves quietly before it moves publicly. Heaven never announces its first move. When God begins to shift your story, He does it in silence. Long before anyone sees the miracle, heaven is already arranging it in secret. While you're wondering if He's forgotten you, angels are moving behind the scenes, aligning details, hearts, and timing. God works like the sunrise. Darkness doesn't end suddenly. Light gradually breaks through. The quiet seasons are proof that God is near, not far. Silence is not evidence of absence, it's evidence of strategy. Before the public manifestation comes private preparation. Heaven never wastes motion. It moves with divine precision. When you feel nothing is happening, that's usually when the most sacred work is being done in the unseen realm. God hides His greatest works from the noise of human approval. That's why breakthroughs begin in whispers, not in headlines. He's not trying to impress, He's trying to transform. He moves quietly so your faith grows deeper than sight. Those who trust the silence receive strength that applause can't give. When heaven moves quietly, it's because it's protecting what's holy. Public exposure before divine maturity invites unnecessary warfare. That's why some of your blessings took so long, not because God forgot, but because He was shielding them from premature attack. What He builds in private becomes unshakable in public. You may think nothing is changing, but heaven is never still. Right now, conversations are happening about you in rooms you've never entered. Doors are being built that you'll walk through at the appointed time. God's favor is forming quietly so that when it appears, it will look sudden, but it was never sudden. It was strategic. Every miracle begins in silence. When Mary conceived the Savior, heaven didn't broadcast it. The most world-changing event in history started in the stillness of obedience. Likewise, your new season is developing quietly, nurtured by God's timing, not human timelines. The lack of noise doesn't mean lack of motion. It means precision. Quiet moves are God's way of preserving peace. If you knew everything He was orchestrating, your heart couldn't handle the weight of it. That's why He works in layers, revealing one piece at a time. Heaven moves quietly, not to confuse you, but to calm you. Silence trains you to trust more than you see. When God is about to reveal something great, He often first removes the crowd. He allows isolation, so your dependence shifts fully to Him. That's why certain relationships ended, doors closed, and voices faded. It wasn't rejection. It was realignment. Heaven needed quiet space to move without interruption. Heaven's quiet work is always deliberate. God doesn't rush results. He refines them. When He moves privately, He's preparing you to carry the public weight of blessing with humility. He doesn't just want to give you success. He wants to make sure success doesn't take you from Him. That's why the silence lasts as long as it must. If you could see the spiritual blueprint of your life right now, you'd realize that every quiet day has purpose. Every delay was a doorway. Every unanswered prayer was an invitation to deeper intimacy. Heaven moves quietly because it's focused on building endurance, not excitement. The quiet move of God separates the impatient from the prepared. Many give up right before manifestation because silence feels like stillness. But those who remain faithful in the invisible season experience explosive results when heaven finally reveals its hand. God is never late. He's deliberate. Public miracles are born in private obedience. Before God displays His glory, He measures your humility. If you can handle the silence without complaining, you're ready for visibility without pride. Heaven never promotes before it proves. The quiet test comes before the loud testimony. The reason your spirit feels stirred lately is because heaven is already moving. You can't see it yet, but you can sense it, that holy tension, that gentle shift, that unexplainable peace amid pressure. Those are signs that divine hands are rearranging what you thought was settled. God is setting the stage for public revelation. By the time others notice your breakthrough, it will already be old news in heaven. What seems sudden to the world has been months, even years in divine motion. Heaven's silence was not delay, it was construction. God was building something that no human opinion could alter. So if life feels quiet right now, don't mistake it for stagnation. Heaven is whispering over your destiny. God is planting roots that no storm can uproot. When He finally reveals what He's been doing, it won't just bless you, it will bless everyone who once doubted you. Because heaven always moves quietly before it moves publicly, and when it moves, it never moves halfway. 4. Your faith is the activation key. Faith is the unseen hand that unlocks heaven's storehouse. Every promise God has made is already written and waiting, but it remains dormant until faith turns the key. God's power is constant, it doesn't weaken or waver, but its manifestation depends on belief. You don't need to convince God to move. You need to believe that He already has. Faith is not begging for change, it's walking as if change has already come. Faith is not a feeling, it's a decision. Feelings fluctuate, but faith stands firm. Faith says, even when I don't see it, I still believe it. God responds not to emotions, but to expectation. Many pray with fear disguised as hope, yet heaven answers the language of trust. Faith doesn't ask if, it declares when. That declaration becomes the signal heaven recognizes. Your faith is the bridge between what's promised and what's possible. Without faith, the gap remains. But with faith, the impossible becomes inevitable. God could bless you instantly, but He wants partnership, not passivity. Faith is the currency that proves you're invested. It's your yes in the unseen, your agreement with what heaven already decided. Every miracle begins with an act of faith. The woman with the issue of blood didn't wait for an invitation. Her faith moved her to touch the hem of Jesus' garment. Blind Bartimaeus shouted until mercy heard him. Faith doesn't wait for confirmation, it becomes confirmation. When you believe, movement begins both in you and around you. Faith activates what fear paralyzes. Fear says, what if it doesn't happen? Faith replies, what if it already has? Heaven cannot manifest where doubt dominates. That's why God often takes you through quiet seasons to detox your faith from fear, to cleanse your belief system until trust becomes your reflex. Your faith is not measured by your words alone, but by your consistency. Anyone can declare belief in a moment of inspiration, but true faith persists when time tests it. Every day you wake up and choose to trust despite delay. Heaven records it. Each act of faith adds another brick to the bridge that leads to your breakthrough. Faith is heaven's legal access point into your reality. God can only release what your belief allows. That's why Jesus often said, according to your faith, be it unto you. He was showing that your expectation shapes your experience. Faith doesn't change God's will, it aligns you with it. It's the key that turns revelation into realization. Your faith must outlive your feelings. When you feel empty, faith whispers, He's still faithful. When doors close, faith says, there must be another one. When the enemy screams that it's over, faith smiles and says, watch what God will do next. The strength of faith isn't in avoiding fear, it's in refusing to obey it. Faith is the seed that multiplies when pressure is applied. When trials hit, your faith is either proven or postponed. God doesn't test faith to see if it exists. He tests it to strengthen it. Every delay, every disappointment, every dark night is not punishment. It's spiritual resistance training. Faith grows stronger in weight. The moment you start believing again, doors you thought were locked begin to shift. Heaven responds to movement, not murmuring. Faith is active. It walks, speaks, gives, and praises before it sees results. That's why true faith always feels premature. It moves while the natural still looks impossible. Faith invites heaven's assistance into human limitation. God doesn't need your perfection. He needs your participation. He can't bless a plan you refuse to start. When you move in faith, heaven meets you halfway. It's not about doing everything, it's about doing something that proves you believe. Your faith will always be tested right before manifestation. The enemy tries to drain your belief at the final hour because he knows faith is the final door. That's why warfare intensifies before breakthrough. If you can hold faith in the storm, you'll hold favor in the season that follows. Faith is not fragile, it's forged. Faith is also the language of heaven. Angels don't respond to anxiety, they respond to agreement. Every time you speak faith, you authorize heaven to intervene. That's why your words matter. When you declare, it will happen, you aren't being optimistic. You're echoing divine truth. Your faith-filled speech is your spiritual signature. Sometimes faith doesn't look bold. It looks quiet. It looks like showing up one more time, praying again, forgiving again, or smiling when everything feels heavy. Faith isn't always loud, it's often loyal. It's that steady confidence that refuses to quit, even when applause is gone. Quiet faith shakes invisible realms, louder than desperate noise ever could. Faith is the activator of divine timing. God's promises aren't delayed, they're waiting for your belief to mature enough to match their weight. The moment you truly believe, time catches up to eternity. The invisible becomes visible. That's why things can shift overnight. Faith finally unlocked what was waiting all along. Every battle you've survived so far was meant to upgrade your faith. Trials aren't random. They're rehearsals for the greater trust required in your next season. When you stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "Use me," your faith reaches a level that scares hell. Because faith that's proven becomes unstoppable. Faith and obedience walk hand in hand. Believing without acting is like owning a key and never turning it. Every instruction God gives is an invitation to unlock something. The moment you obey in faith, even when it doesn't make sense, you activate heaven's next move. Action is faith's loudest prayer. The beauty of faith is that it multiplies. The more you use it, the more it grows. One answered prayer fuels the next. One miracle births another. Faith is not a one-time event, it's a lifestyle of expecting God's goodness in every situation. Once you start living by faith, nothing surprises you anymore. It only confirms what you already knew. Faith is the power that transforms waiting into worship. It keeps your spirit alive while your eyes still see nothing. It allows you to live in gratitude before the manifestation ever arrives. Faith sees the end while standing in the middle. And when you live like that, miracles stop being occasional, they become normal. So remember this, God has already written your breakthrough into the blueprint of time. But heaven waits for your faith to turn the key. You don't need a new word, you need renewed belief. Before November 7, don't look for more signs, look for stronger faith. Because once faith activates, what was impossible yesterday becomes inevitable tomorrow. Woo. The old season is closing completely. There comes a moment in every believer's life when God says, "This chapter is done." Not because He's angry, but because He's preparing you for something higher. The pain you've been feeling lately is not punishment, it's closure. Heaven is shutting the door on what no longer fits your future. You cannot carry yesterday into tomorrow and expect transformation. The old season isn't just ending, it's expiring by divine command. The old season closes when its purpose is fulfilled. You may not understand why people drifted away or why opportunities vanished, but heaven does. God never removes what's necessary, He only removes what's expired. If something is being taken, it's because it can no longer serve where He's leading you. Don't fight for what God is finished with. Let it end in peace. Sometimes God closes a season abruptly because if He gave you time to negotiate, you'd never let it go. You'd cling to comfort disguised as calling. That's why certain doors slam shut without explanation, because God's mercy sometimes feels like loss. What looks like an ending is actually His protection. Every ending in the kingdom is a seed for a new beginning. The soil of endings feels like grief, but it's pregnant with growth. God uses closure to create capacity. If you keep one foot in the old, you can't step into the new. The longer you linger in what's familiar, the longer your faith remains small. The closing season is not a failure, it's fulfillment. You completed what heaven assigned. You learned what you needed to learn. God is too intentional to waste pain. Every disappointment was data for your destiny. And now that you've outgrown the old season, it can no longer contain your spirit. When heaven shifts, the atmosphere around you changes. Conversations start feeling shallow. Environments that once fed you now drain you. This isn't you becoming ungrateful, it's you evolving. The old frequency can't hold the new revelation. When God upgrades your purpose, He must also update your surroundings. Letting go is proof that you trust God more than your timeline. The closure of one season doesn't mean He stopped working, it means He's building something beyond your sight. The door that's closing is not rejection, it's redirection. The hallway between endings and beginnings is holy. Walk it with peace, not panic. You cannot resurrect what God buried. The old season served its purpose: relationships, jobs, emotions, even habits that once helped you. Stop resuscitating what heaven has declared finished. Closure is sacred. God doesn't need your permission to protect your destiny. He ends what you refuse to outgrow. The pain of endings often hides the beauty of alignment. While you're crying over what's gone, heaven is celebrating what's coming. God sees the full picture, not just the missing pieces. What you think is breaking you is actually freeing you. You're not losing stability, you're losing stagnation. Old seasons end because your spirit has graduated. The lessons that once stretched you now bore you. God cannot pour new oil into old wineskins. The pressure you feel is the friction between who you were and who you're becoming. Don't fight the shift, flow with it. When God says it's over, He's not taking something from you. He's making space for something better. The same hand that closed the door will open another. But you can't receive new instructions while clinging to old expectations. Release the expired version of your life. It's too small for your next assignment. Every closed door carries an invisible message. Trust me here. When you stop fighting what ended, peace enters. You'll start to see that the closure wasn't a curse. It was a course correction. God had to redirect your path because your promise was in a different direction. Heaven doesn't close doors out of cruelty. It closes them to conserve energy. Every no you received was saving your strength for your yes. The rejection you endured was redirection towards something your spirit couldn't yet imagine. What feels like subtraction is preparation for multiplication. In this moment, heaven is decluttering your destiny. God is removing what you no longer need to carry: burdens, expectations, false responsibilities. The old season was heavy because you were holding too much. The new season will feel lighter because obedience is weightless. There's peace in accepting closure. The enemy wants you to mourn what God is moving, but God says, celebrate it. You can't receive resurrection until you allow burial. Every closed door is an altar, a place where you lay down control and lift up faith. Don't confuse delay with staying stuck. God doesn't leave you in limbo. He leaves you in transition. The cocoon looks like death, but it's transformation. You're not being buried, you're being planted. And what's buried in obedience always blooms in divine timing. The old season is closing because new instructions are on the way. God can't speak fresh revelation to an occupied heart. Silence is His way of saying, make room. If you can sit quietly in closure, you'll start to hear His whisper guiding you into the next chapter. Stop trying to understand what went wrong. Nothing went wrong. Everything went right, according to heaven's plan. You prayed for growth, and God answered with endings. You asked for peace, and He removed chaos. The pain was not punishment, it was pruning. There's a divine finality in this hour. You'll notice how the old season no longer calls to you. The same things that once excited you will now exhaust you. It's because your spirit is no longer compatible with smallness. You've been stretched for something larger. God will not allow you to stay attached to what limits you. That's why He let certain connections fade without explanation. Not every goodbye is betrayal. Some are blessings in disguise. You can't reach your promised land while carrying everyone from Egypt. Every ending has evidence of divine mercy. If God let it end, it's because He's already written the next scene. He never leaves you at the period. He's always preparing the paragraph after. The ending is simply punctuation before revelation. There's a sacred rhythm in how God transitions you. He never rushes, yet He never wastes time. He allows discomfort to nudge you out of what's familiar. The shaking you feel is not instability, it's movement. Heaven is rearranging your surroundings so your spirit can breathe again. When the old season ends, closure is not optional, it's essential. You must make peace with what no longer aligns. Don't drag expired emotions into your next blessing. Unforgiveness, regret, and nostalgia are chains that keep you tied to what's gone. Cut them before God cuts you loose. You are not being punished for outgrowing people, places, or dreams. You are being promoted. Growth always offends comfort. The old version of you cannot survive in the atmosphere of your destiny. That's why heaven is gently forcing you forward. What's ending now will soon make sense. The job loss, the silence, the shift, it's all part of the same plan. You're standing on sacred ground, even if it feels empty. The soil of endings always hides the seed of beginnings. You don't have to understand closure to honor it. Just say, "Thank you, Lord, for endings that protect me from mistakes I can't yet see." Gratitude is the gate that turns loss into legacy. What you release in worship returns multiplied in wisdom. When God closes a season completely, He leaves no door for you to re-enter. It's not punishment, it's preservation. If you tried to go back, you'd suffocate in the atmosphere you've already outgrown. The exit is sealed because the promise is ahead. This is the divine message for you right now. Stop grieving what God has graduated you from. The old season is not your identity. It was your classroom. Take the lessons, leave the pain, and move forward in faith. Because the God who closed this door is already standing in the next one, waiting to welcome you into the new. 6. God's change comes with clarity and confirmation. When God begins to change your life, He does not leave you in confusion. His transformation always arrives with peace, direction, and confirmation. Confusion belongs to the enemy, but clarity belongs to God. When He shifts your season, He also adjusts your sight. Suddenly, what once made sense begins to lose meaning, and what once seemed impossible begins to feel natural. That's how you know the change is divine. It brings understanding, not chaos. God's clarity is not always loud. It's often still and subtle. He speaks through impressions, through timing, through the quiet conviction in your heart that refuses to fade. You won't need to force clarity when it's from Him. It will flow like light through darkness. When heaven moves, everything begins to align with supernatural ease. Clarity is heaven's confirmation that you're walking in divine order. God never moves without revealing purpose, even if it's in fragments. He may not show you the whole map, but He will give you enough light for the next step. Each act of obedience brings more visibility, like dawn breaking slowly over the horizon. When God's change comes, confusion lifts like fog. What used to drain you suddenly feels irrelevant. People who once distracted you no longer carry influence. Your spirit becomes sharper because heaven has fine-tuned your frequency. Divine clarity always exposes counterfeit connections. God confirms His direction in multiple ways because He knows your heart doubts easily. You'll hear the same message through prayer, scripture, or even a stranger's word. Patterns repeat until your spirit recognizes them as signals. Heaven speaks in echoes, not to annoy you, but to anchor you. Clarity is not the absence of uncertainty, it's the presence of peace in the middle of it. You may not know every detail, but your heart knows you're safe. That peace is heaven's signature. When something is truly from God, it will not compete with your rest, it will complete it. Before God releases clarity, He removes noise. That's why your circle shrank, your plans paused, and your distractions disappeared. Silence became sacred. He had to clear the clutter so you could hear the whisper. God's change requires quietness to deliver clear revelation. When heaven speaks, your spirit will know. The words may be simple, but the weight will be undeniable. It will pierce you deeper than emotion. It will carry authority. True confirmation doesn't flatter your desires, it corrects your direction. It doesn't make you feel powerful, It makes you feel positioned. God often gives confirmation after your first act of obedience, not before. He tests trust by movement. When you take one faithful step, the next becomes visible. Many wait for clarity before they act, but clarity is born in motion. Heaven honors faith more than fear. When God changes your path, He confirms it by removing confusion. He won't contradict Himself. If you have to constantly convince yourself it's right, it's probably not divine. But when it's God, peace will chase you even in the unknown. Every step will feel protected, even if not predictable. Clarity and confirmation are heaven's way of comforting your humanity. God knows how easily fear can cloud discernment, so He gives signs along the way: a closed door that saved you, a word that hit your soul, a dream that refused to fade. These are divine fingerprints marking your timeline. The Holy Spirit is the interpreter of God's change. He translates heavenly shifts into human understanding. That sudden realization you couldn't explain, that's not coincidence. That's confirmation. When you're sensitive to His voice, even silence becomes instruction. God's change never leaves you uncertain about His character. You may not understand His methods, but you'll sense His presence. His peace becomes proof. His consistency becomes confirmation. You'll find yourself saying, I don't know what's happening, but I know who's behind it. Clarity often begins with separation. God will distance you from environments that blur your focus. You'll notice how your spirit feels drained in places it used to thrive. That discomfort isn't punishment, it's guidance. Heaven sharpens vision through disconnection. When God is about to shift your destiny, He begins to expose false voices. You'll see manipulation, pride, and deception surface around you. That exposure is clarity. God won't let you walk blind into a new chapter. He reveals what must be released before the reveal of what's next. Sometimes God uses repetition to confirm direction. If the same message keeps crossing your path in sermons, songs, or conversations, don't ignore it. Heaven repeats what's essential. God is patient with your uncertainty, but persistent with His plan. When heaven brings clarity, it dismantles confusion gently but firmly. Old desires start losing power, and divine conviction replaces human ambition. You stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, what is God saying? That shift in question marks the start of your transformation. God's confirmations are rarely dramatic. They're divine nudges that align your heart. You might feel peace where logic says panic. You might sense joy where nothing has changed. That's how you know heaven is speaking. It overrides human understanding with supernatural calm. Every genuine change from God comes with a knowing that doesn't fade. You can't shake it, ignore it, or talk yourself out of it. That knowing is divine residue, heaven's assurance stamped on your soul. Even when doubt whispers, faith remembers. Sometimes confirmation doesn't come from what opens, it comes from what closes. God's no is as holy as His yes. Closed doors confirm direction too. They redirect your steps toward what's meant, not just what's available. His boundaries are blessings disguised as barriers. When you're aligned with divine change, your discernment becomes sharper. You begin to sense what's meant for you without explanation. Your spirit recognizes resonance. You'll say, this feels right, not from comfort, but from connection. Heaven's frequency always matches peace. God never changes your season without first preparing your sight. He upgrades your spiritual vision before He upgrades your circumstances. That's why He sometimes blinds you to distractions, not to frustrate you, but to focus you. Clarity comes from consecration. Every divine shift carries confirmation through fruit, not feelings. Look at the results, not just the emotions. What grows from it? Does it bring peace? Does it honor God? If yes, it's heaven's hand at work. True confirmation produces life, not confusion. The closer you walk with God, the faster you recognize His signals. The same lessons that once took months now take moments. Spiritual maturity shortens confusion. You begin to move with grace, knowing that what's meant for you cannot be mistaken. Clarity often comes after surrender. When you stop forcing your will, His direction becomes visible. Obedience opens your eyes. You realize the delay wasn't punishment, it was calibration. Heaven was adjusting your focus before releasing your next step. When God confirms His plan, it feels familiar, as if your spirit already knew. That's because it did. Eternity is written in your DNA. Divine clarity doesn't feel foreign, it feels like remembering something you were always meant to know. Heaven's confirmation also brings courage. Once you know it's God, fear loses leverage. You start walking boldly, even through unknown territory. Confidence in direction comes from certainty in the director. God's change doesn't bring competition, it brings contentment. When you're aligned with His will, you no longer chase what belongs to others. You understand that what's yours will recognize you. Clarity cancels comparison. Every major transformation begins in confusion but ends in confirmation. You may start the process doubting every step, but by the end, you'll say, "Now I see why." God's hand becomes obvious only after obedience. Faith unlocks understanding. The change of God always carries alignment with timing. He doesn't just move you to a new place, He synchronizes you with divine moments. People will call it coincidence, but you'll know it's coordination. Heaven's timing is the ultimate confirmation. Divine clarity always comes wrapped in humility. You realize that your wisdom could never have arranged things so perfectly. That awe you feel is worship, the recognition that only God could orchestrate what now makes sense. As this new season unfolds, you'll begin to recognize signs you once missed. That conversation that felt random, that door that reopened, that peace that came out of nowhere, all were confirmations waiting for your awareness to catch up. You will know you're in divine change when your spirit feels at rest, even when your surroundings are shifting. That's the beauty of God's process. External instability cannot shake internal clarity. Peace is proof of presence, and when the clarity fully arrives, you'll realize that everything confusing before was just God clearing the way. The unanswered prayers, the closed doors, the long silence, they were all part of the same story. Heaven was writing alignment, not delay. So don't rush to understand every detail. Clarity grows with trust. Confirmation multiplies with faith. The same God who began this change is faithful to complete it. And when He does, you'll look back and say, "Now I see what once confused me was actually the clearest sign that God was moving all along." Before November 7, you will look back and realize nothing was delayed. Everything was divine. The tears you cried were watering the very ground that is now about to bloom. The confusion you felt was God quietly removing what could not go where He's taking you. This is not just another message, it's a confirmation. Heaven is whispering, your season is about to shift. Stay still, stay faithful, stay expectant. The same God who marked this word on your timeline is the one orchestrating the miracle behind it. You don't need to chase anything, just stay aligned. What is meant for you will begin to locate you. By the time November 7 arrives, you will sense it, the release, the peace, the proof that God never forgot you. And when it happens, don't rush to announce it. Sit in gratitude. Let your silence testify louder than words, because what God is doing for you before this date will speak for itself.